Exactly. Forgot too much everything. Part of the kickoff.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Ivan. We can get started. Ivan Gill's in the house. And right behind the shaker, so we will go ahead and get started. Y'all want to get started?
This is Walter.
Walter.
Hi, nice to
Ivan
meet
Gill.
you.
My pleasure.
That's my wife, Chris.
Chris, my pleasure.
Hi, nice to meet you.
All right.
Hello, nice to meet you.
All right. So we're just about to get started. So we don't have a whole lot of overhead this week as far as information to put out. I do want to recognize one person in the room. Jackie has earned her Security Plus certification. I know that that's quite an accomplishment, especially and timely. Yes. So, anybody else have any new?
I also passed my CISA.
Oh, nice.
Now you got to pay back to that yearly mandatory fee.
Yes.
So you need to start going to the chapter meeting.
I have been going, actually, great.
Yeah, I'm just looking out.
So we will expect a full report at our board meetings every.
I'll be close.
Yes. Auditing, yeah, you're going to be on the. Well, you're going to have to audit, but yeah, exactly.
I filed CCMP 20 days ago.
Oh, yes. Good job, everyone. Good job.
How many does that make now? I've lost count.
I think 22.
Catching up.
And you're a sophomore, right? College?
Yeah, sophomore.
Hasn't even started this year. It's only.
22 cents.
Pretty expensive to maintain that.
It is.
That's why he has scholarships
Any
and
great scholarships to help with,
just to pay the fees. Yeah. Fortunately, he has a good standby to write letters of recommendation for him, so it seems to be working out. I don't have a whole lot of overhead to talk about. I just want to remind everybody about the chapter challenge. So I was explaining a little bit of it to Walter. Walter can take away from all of your thunder as far as bio, but in addition to what Granger will explain and maybe taking away a little bit of his thunder, Walter is also the treasurer for the ISC Square chapter in Conundrum. So wears multiple hats. So we've been comparing notes on how we're doing things. I think we've got a lot to learn, and hopefully we can maybe bring them on board to participating in chapter challenge 1 year so that it gets a lot more attention. So far, I do owe Carol with the center, I owe her our commitment letter to let her know that we're going to participate. So that's on me. The duration of the collections goes through the end of August, so we have until the end of August in order to make our donations. I have it on good authority prior to the announcement with our chapter, with our program, with North Carolina Adidas program. I had it on good authority that we are still in the running for the grant. Last time I checked, it was $2,500. So that's a gauntlet that's been laid down. So I also talked with Christina Bonifant from Lumos Networks. They are still going to make a commitment this year. I just have to reach out to her now that we have the official wording for our message to go out. I'll be reaching out to her this week to work with her on their pledge for the chapter challenge. And so we're at least halfway there. We want to beat our amount from last year, which is $1,100. So until it hurts, go back to your organizations and see if they want to sponsor that next generation of cybersecurity professionals and get on board. I would like to do another check presentation ceremony to recognize the organizations that have donated to the challenge. Hopefully we will have a lot of them, so we'll need a big space to do that in this year. What else?
I don't.
website, there's lots of events coming up pretty quick.
That's true. So Black Hat's going on soon. I've got it also on good authority that DEFCON is canceled, so I'm planning on going.
No way. Really?
That's the running joke.
It's always canceled. But in reality, I was originally going, but it did get canceled for me. That's okay. I'll survive. That being said, DEFCON, Black Hat, ISC Square Security Congress is coming up in October. It's in New Orleans. If you can make it, please let one of us know. I kind of need to know soon if you're planning on going, if you're able to go. We were asked, the chapter was asked to present in a panel discussion at the Security Congress. Talk about the scholarship and the State of Secure Online presentations that we've done, just to kind of talk about all of the things that we've been involved in with the Center for Cyber Safety and Education. So they were looking for someone from our chapter to sit on the panel and talk about how we've done it and try to promote it in a way that will get more people engaged and enthusiastic about it. It's an underutilized resource. I've already said that. So that's the only ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But check with the events page. There's lots going on.
And thus far, nobody from our board can go.
Yeah, we try to make it work, but I'll let you.
Yeah. So as Chris said, on loan from the ISC Squared chapter in Quantico, their treasurer, our speaker tonight, Walter, has over 35 years in IT, much like myself, and has worked in IT security and audit, managing projects for the federal government, both as an employee and as a contractor. He sports several nice certifications there. I don't know how you went from CPA to CISSP.
I started CPA. Okay, I'll tell you.
But anyway, please welcome Walter. Alaska.
Hi, my name's Walter Opaska, and as I was introduced, I am the treasurer of the Quantico branch, and I'm giving a presentation on the default password conundrum. Next slide. In my bio, which was covered pretty well in my introduction, but he asked the interesting question: how I went from CISSP to CPA. Actually, I went the other way. I was a postal inspector, and I don't know if you all know what postal inspector did at the time. They were a federal law enforcement agency that also did audits, internal audits of the Postal Service and of contractors and things like that. And through that, I became a CPA. And then I wound up, they needed at the time, back in dinosaur age, they needed people to go out and audit their mainframe centers. And I was one of the people they chose to do that. And from then I went into IT security. I left the inspection service and worked for the Postal Service down in North Carolina as a security manager for one of their data centers. And then I became a CISSP, which is also interesting because the Postal Service, I was with the group that helped pioneer the first test. And believe me, first test was easy compared to what you guys do now. I hear everybody talking about the test now, and now you're on the computer, the computerized test where you can't go back and look at your answer from what I heard people talking about at our last chapter meeting, and it was it seems very difficult. And I feel fortunate to do that. And I worked a lot in IT audit, so I wound up picking up my CISA because that helps you get jobs in IT audit. Like the CISSP helps you get jobs, particularly with federal government, because it's a requirement for level 2 IAT. And as I said, I am the treasurer of the ISC Squared Quantico chapter. We're a lot smaller than you guys, but we have 42 members and we do okay, and I was formerly the membership chair. Next slide. A conundrum is a default password problem. A conundrum, and I went to the free dictionary and picked up this definition of a conundrum: an unsolvable, difficult problem. And is it one that keeps popping up? And does this definition fit? And some security professionals disagree. And the reason I say that is because the genesis for this topic is I attended the 2017 ISC Squared cybersecure.gov. Actually, our chapter, Quantico chapter, had a booth there, and I manned the booth. And when you man the booth, you can also attend presentations, various presentations during that day. So I attended one by a former member. I attended one. I actually forget the topic. Okay. And I can remember a couple of things about it. He used to work for CrowdStrike, okay, and I asked, and it was about security, current security problems. And I asked him a question: are default passwords still a problem in your opinion? And he said, no, I don't think they're very much of a problem at all. Okay, and so that got me thinking, and that's where I started working on this presentation after that. Next slide. And this presentation will try to answer the conundrum question and by outlining the default password problem, explaining why the conundrum definition applies, and then discussing contemporary issues. And that's because I started out, like I said, 35 years. I started out in the mainframe era, big iron era. And that was a problem then with like various layered products and even some of IBM's products. And then you could see it morph as we went from another platform to another. It kept morphing and changing, but it was still there. It was like the solution had to be reinvented over and over again. And that's why it seems it's popped up in contemporary issues in a very odd and important way, and that's why I feel that. Next slide. Next, the default password problem. What are default passwords? Just built-in login pairs, built into databases, system firmware, software. Services like FTP or Telnet and those type of things. I call them benign. Some are benign. I think of the Scott default password with Oracle, and that's just a training password. But that seems to be around, and I don't know if it's still around, but it's been around for a long time. And others are very powerful, like root, and like it says before, it's on all platforms. Next slide. And uses, initial installations or upgrades, support, vendor help desk, give it out, sales demonstrations, internet communication, such as the anonymous accounts, and it also simplifies programming by hard coding a password into a system. And this way, if somebody wants to say do maintenance, they can just go in, use that password, and they don't have to worry about, for say remote from the vendor, they don't have to worry about even dealing with, in many cases, the staff on site at the company, at their customer. Next slide. And the nature of the default password threat, it can cause major damage because some of them are highly privileged accounts, and also is magnified by being on the internet. And as I said before, it's a long-term problem. Like I said, it existed from the mainframe big iron days and still exists. It exists in many environments, and the word of the day on default password is ubiquitous everywhere. Next slide. And found on like Unix routes, databases, industrial control systems, even down to the home appliances and the Internet of Things. Next slide. Why used? Customer support, vendor troubleshooting, as I talked about before, internet communications, database communications, and simplified development. And if default users, and the question is, if default users, passwords, and IDs are so useful, why are they such a security problem? Next slide. And why the conundrum word applies. Default password security problems. Widely known. Root is a classic example of that. Exists on many commercial systems. May carry high-level privileges, often tightly integrated into operations. Yes, if root again, if that's the master password, that's it. Present on mission-critical systems, frequently left unsecured at installation. It will mask the audit trail. If everybody's logging in on the same password, it'll obscure more difficult. Particularly if you don't have any other means of determining where they're coming from, such as, say, an IP address. Hard-coded defaults are sometimes difficult to remove and can be easily exploited even by a novice. Well, there's many sites that have the default passwords for various types of equipment, such as routers and various systems. Next slide. Most critical vulnerabilities, though, are the information can be available to anyone because it's like available on the internet and in manuals and things like that. And it's also easy to exploit. Next slide. And default password attack types. Brute force, just simply going in and hitting it. Dictionary use a dictionary or some sort of database of attack password logon pairs or password pairs, and use that. Automated attacks combine a database with a dictionary and attack, and complex internet attacks. Say using a series of botnets to attack and look for these default passwords and attack and take over ownership of those sites. Next slide. And the default password information sources, numerous sources. Vendor manuals and data, the internet, books, information systems training, and the sources cause these problems to fester. Next slide. And the seriousness that they were recognized in the top 10 by two of the top security threat characterizations sites, such as the SANS Institute, and the most critical security internet threats. Next slide, please. And they've also had cert alert on that. They've also had it's NIST, part of NIST, PCDISS, DHS alert, and other warnings put out on default passwords. Next slide. And the conundrum rationale, it has lasted for decades, from the mainframe to the internet, numerous platforms, and it has morphed into unexpected areas. Next slide. Contemporary default password issues. Next slide. A contemporary example, Central Rappahannock Regional Library. That's the library, that's a regional library up in the Fredericksburg, Virginia area, okay? And they have a website where you could log on and just, if you want to, you want to manage your own account, just like anything else. Manage your own account, manage your books, renew them, put a book on reserve and things like that. They a unique type of default password that they use for a user to manage their account. And while it's not an earth-shaking example of a problem, okay, it is a interesting example of a contemporary default password because the site is up. In fact, I used it today, and it uses a unique type of default password. Next slide, please. Okay, if you can see that, if you can go down on your left-hand side, the login, username or barcode, because this username, people have username, or you can use a barcode number with the library card that they issue you, and it also has a PIN number, and if you look below the PIN number, it says usually the last 4 digits of your phone number. So that means if they know if you know a person's phone number, and you can guess their username, or if it's like a typical username, because it's usually connected with an email address, like say Yahoo or Google.com, and it's very easy for somebody to use that unique type of default password. It's not the classic like the root password, but it's a variation on a similar thing. But they're still using this, and they want to. I guess they still want to use it. They don't feel it's a threat, but that's an example of one, not exactly within your area, but very close. Okay, that exists. Next slide, please. There's also on SCADA systems, supervisory control, data acquisition, manufacturing programs used in utilities and manufacturing facilities to manage operations. A major European SCADA manufacturer hard-coded known default passwords, and then they were targeted by malware. And it was said over 50% of SCADA suppliers had hard-coded passwords. Next slide. Small satellite dish systems were vulnerable to cyber attacks. That's 10,500. More. That's something really wouldn't occur to me if I wasn't in the business. Unless I were in the business. That they can. One, they can be reached, I guess, through the internet, and two, they have default passwords that are available for, I guess, for maintenance and managing updates, updates to the software. And also very small aperture terminals that use for remote broadband internet, or also to transmit point-of-sale credit card transactions. Many have default passwords and can be attacked. Next slide, please. Databases have been plagued with default passwords. Oracle is a good example, and it's also evolved into other types of databases, such as NoSQL databases. MongoDB, as an example, had no passwords for maintenance until 2015, and after 2015, the issue was fixed. But some of the older ones were still subject to organized Bitcoin ransom attacks. I guess they wanted to use a relatively free, low-cost database to run their system, and they didn't check it totally out. Next slide. And a big one is the Internet of Things. It brought a new dimension to to default password, the default password problem. And there's estimated 1 trillion IoT devices in industry by 2020. And I've read that the majority of IoT devices shipped to users have default passwords and already set by factory manufacturers, and this was verified by McAfee.com. Next slide, please. And this is a chart on the Internet of Things where we are going with this, where the Internet of Things is going to be as opposed to other smart devices. And by 2019, it'll be about three times the number of devices connected to the Internet of Things versus other things such as smartphones or personal computers and those type of devices. And that's an estimate. Next slide, please. And these are various types of devices with IoT devices that have default passwords, cameras, printers, because your printer's always calling the mothership, and for updates and things like that. DVR recorders, cellular modems, solar panels, and even medical devices were found to have default passwords. Next slide. And IT denial of service and defaults. And there were two massive, in 2016, there were two massive denial of service attacks enabled by IoT devices attacking default passwords, other devices with default passwords. And the first one was a attack by a Chemi, denial of service attack, the largest attack the company ever had. And it was a denial of a botnet attack device that first the mothership communicated with the devices and found those that had default passwords and used them as bots to attack them. And the same thing with the October 20th, 2016 attack on the DNS provider Dyn US that affected the East Coast of USA and also brought down Amazon and Twitter and others. And I think that was okay. And also one of these attacked Krebs from Krebs on Security, and I think it was the Acme attack. And these were called, both together were called the Mirai attacks. Next slide, please. The Mirai attack characteristics were DNS attacks using Mirai software, and they originate from thousands of mainly cameras and DVRs that were used in homes and small offices, and most from one Chinese manufacturer. The device used factory hard-coded default IDs and passwords and spread by scanning the internet for IoT devices with these default passwords, then took them over and made them botnets to attack the ultimate victim. And how would you know you had this? I don't know. How would anybody know? How would you know that you had this problem? I don't think any of these any of the purchasers, the end users of those IoT devices, cameras, knew that they had that. How would you know?
Firewall could catch it.
Firewall could catch it, but yeah, if you had it on a firewall, and if you well, there's something you can, yeah, firewall could stop it, but a lot of these aren't on firewalls. They're just out there.
Some ISPs are doing scanning onto that level. They're not
Yeah.
looking for this, but they'll look for infected machines because it affects their network.
Yeah.
Would it be nice if they added that to the mix, because a lot of the manufacturers use the same subcomponent manufacturers, and a lot of the problems result from there because they share their code, they share their devices, they share. Like you see similar devices.
Does anybody scan their devices at home, like their cameras or TVs? Okay. I started it, but for reasons beyond this presentation, I had to stop. Okay, because I was interested in my TV in particular because I know I don't have a smart TV, but I have maybe a 50 or 60 IQ TV. Okay, because I know it communicates with Samsung. Okay, but I
just to get to jump in with this, so I think 2 years ago, probably, I think my boss brought in one of the cameras he bought off of Amazon, and he plugged it in just to check it out. And I know the traffic and the firewall logs immediately, and I started calling out about to China, and then we started breaking it. I sort of got into it, and then we did dig in into the code of that camera, and then we found those hard-coded credentials that had to be broken up. But then when I looked it up, they were directly related to that attack. But the worst problem is that could not be even updated. Like you could not update it without reflashing the firmware on it, and that is it has 2,000 reviews on Amazon, and they're all 5 stars, and pretty much no one knows about that. And I caught it within like 5 seconds of it becoming online.
I think that you're the exception, you're not the norm. I know my neighbors, I know my parents, and honestly, I know myself and how lazy I can be at times. So I do think you're the exception, you're not the norm.
but you brought that into work too.
That's true, but I have the same thing at home. So
okay, but you didn't scan it at home. You didn't do a home scan.
But I have the same system at home.
Okay.
So I would see it.
Okay.
He would.
Okay. Yeah, I was told about him and with this impressive, but still, even still,
Not many people have the equipment to do it or the know-how to do it.
or even
So it's a huge issue.
the awareness to do it. Yeah.
And also another note, that password was not just an admin password. It was something like completely random. It wasn't even Chinese. It was just it wasn't encrypted. Well, the password was encrypted, but you can easily just look up the hash.
Was the traffic that was being sent back to China encrypted, or was that clear text?
I'm pretty sure it was clear text, but it was in China rule, and I have China rule everywhere. Can't go there.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. But the average person who's buying that camera, say you want, security, you would never know that. You could never fix it either, like you said.
Yes, the worst problem in order to fix it, because there was one person somewhere on the internet who actually did it, but you have to take off the flash from the camera, and you have to use a special device. We got the device, and you have to literally re-flash it on there. So it's not a very easy process to change it. Even after you know it, it's very difficult to change it because there's no easy way to change it.
Have you submitted it to my for CC? Actually, it wouldn't be. Sorry, we got gas.
Okay. No, that's fine. Okay. Next slide. Attack fixes. Well, we went through part of that, and not easy. For some of these attacks, I told you to pull. For the Mirai attack, you could eliminate by turning the power off. Okay. Yeah, it's like turn the power off to reset your router. Yeah, no brainer. You know that what they tell the text tell the dumb user at home to do, right? Pull the plug first. Turn it off. Wait 2 minutes. I've done that many times. Eliminate by power output, reinfection can easily recur. Yeah. You can also, that's very soon. Manufacturer issued a recall and was also threatened with lawsuits. Now on these, the owner can go to an administrator web page, enter the default password, change to a new password. But like you said, there's many out there. And it's not this easy. And this is not that easy.
And this was actually a different password. This is not the web password.
Yeah.
This is the password.
Yeah. But not that easy. And like I said, this is not that easy. Okay, how many people did that? How many companies did that? How many people knew that their system was taken over? I don't think that many. And it's a very difficult password. And it's how it morphed. Default password Conundrum morphed into a new and problem that even a few years ago nobody would have ever saw it. Nobody would have ever saw it. And very, very hard nut to crack. Next slide, please. And there are some other, these are just default password attacks that are occurring in 2018. And one is just the simple help desk tech password resets. The volume of password resets causes techs to use defaults. And I was through that. I was like I said, I was a security manager for the Postal Service at the Raleigh, North Carolina data center for a number of years. And even on the mainframes, we had 25,000 users. And we had a whole, in our help desk, that was their #1 problem, setting passwords. And we would get the second level. We would do the second level of the password resets or for special people. And, you know, you're just tempted to do that, just give them a default and send them on their way, okay? Because some of them call again and again and again and again, you know? And you wonder how they got the jobs they got. It's serious. But, yeah, and so they use defaults. And they said one of the defaults that was starting to become common was season and year, like spring 2018. Easy to remember, worked well with the 90-day password reset schedule, and that was coming a problem. And also, like I said, default password router web pages, some of them have started going, and IT botnet attacks are still continuing on this default because of the success. Because of this, but not to the extent of the older ones. Next slide, please. Default password solutions. Obvious solution, change them. Easier said than done. Use unique passwords, if you can. That solves part of the problem, okay? That was like root. So they use an alternate unique password with Tor, T-O-O-R. Okay, kind of works. Some of them kind of works, but still a default. Use alternative authentication mechanisms. If you can do that, that's fine. That works very good. That works very good if you have your bank account. You should never be using defaults with bank account, but use that type of alternative identification method where you have to enter in a code that was text to you. But that may be excuse me, that may be some organizations feel it's overkill for many of the problems and wouldn't apply to many of these default password instances. Force default password changes. Yeah, just like root is another example where they force you to change it. Many distributions force you to change it right off back. Restrict network access. That's more of an old school type solution, but can work, say, for manufacturing that doesn't need to connect. Identified effective products. That's a start. That's a start. Audits and continuous monitoring, if it will pick that stuff, that kind of problem up. Also, speaking of audits, when I not exactly audits, but when I worked doing federal government 853 assessments, one of the things they wanted to do was test systems, and a lot of times you had a number of systems to do. A number of systems to do, and you didn't have much time, okay? And that you couldn't do a whole full-blown penetration test. That would be the question. Just simply the time and getting everything going, and the coordination, which I find we do those type of things is as much as, if not more, of a problem than doing the test itself in many organizations. But a lot of times you could do a quick default password test, which would basically comply with the 853 for the testing, and it'd be quick, and you could see if you had a problem or not. And I used it that way. Next slide, please. And IoT, solutions with IoT are difficult, but these are some that I read, and some aren't really, some really apply and some really can't apply. Secure your wireless network. That was said. Firewall may catch it. Depends on the robustness of your firewall. Disable network guest access. Obscure the name. That may work also. Good password management. I don't think that's on the top of the list of some of these Chinese camera manufacturers. They want to get something out there quick. What's the story? I can give you quick, cheap, or quality. Well, quick and cheap is winning out in that state. Install a unified threat management appliance. That's sort of like that's sort of like securing the network with a black box, and examine each IoT device you own. That's easier said than done. How do you even know it is an IoT device? That comes the first question. Okay, when you buy your TV, or even something small like a security camera. How do you know? Next slide. Install security software whenever possible. Check manufacturers' websites for firmware updates. That may be difficult to do. Just even identifying who the manufacturer is maybe a problem, because if it said it may be labeled by a reseller, you'll never even know who exactly the true manufacturer is. And pay attention to brands. Yeah, you can do that, but it's like I said, quick, cheaper quality. If you're going for quick or cheap, it's I guess it's buyer beware. Next slide, please. And I feel that this quote applies to the default password conundrum. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. It's been variously attributed to Edmund Burke, George Santayana, Winston Churchill, and Jesse Ventura. So, but I feel that applies to the default password conundrum. The problem existed over 40 years ago, and I feel it's even bigger than ever with IoT devices. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I'm curious to know who from CrowdStrike told you that default passwords are no longer used.
You know, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, and I've been trying to look. I spent a lot of time yesterday looking up. He does not work for CrowdStrike anymore. I think it said formerly from CrowdStrike. I think I said that, but he said that it was a question. You know how when you go and you go to a thing, you ask a question afterwards, you know, and he kind of blew me away. Okay, a younger guy, but and that's what I attributed it to. Okay, no offense taken, please, but if I do, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to add it to my presentation, or maybe I'll just eliminate the CrowdStrike thing, because I can already remember a couple of things. It took me a while even to figure out the name of the what do you call it? The CyberSecure. Okay, CyberSecure 2 2017 does not work for CrowdStrike anymore. Okay, so that maybe that attitude is part of the reasons why he does not work for CrowdStrike anymore. Okay.
One thing I would for to the group is default passwords for people. So obviously we in the security community practice what we preach, and we don't use the same password on every site that we go to. Hopefully that's true. But even if it's just a specific type of algorithm, if your account or your password gets cracked, a person could create a profile on you. What's your default go-to when you're creating passwords? I think that's also a challenge too. Is how do we break that source of bad habit? The person.
That's true, and yeah, you're right, and it's a legitimate threat because that did happen. I think now I'm thinking about it with the big Yahoo, what password problems they had. The problems they had that they were able to break some of those passwords, and they could try them other places. Yeah, and I think that is a big problem. Well, at least don't do it on your online banking. Keep something different.
I try to talk my daughter into not using the same password on everything. She's starting to come around. She doesn't like that whole techie stuff. So that's a good thing. She still likes writing resumes and everything. And hopefully that's good.
My son learned a hard lesson because he had his favorite passwords, and he had all these, of course, these security questions, which if anybody knows you well enough, could figure out a lot of the answers to those, including his ex-girlfriend, who hacked several of his accounts after they broke up. Yeah, so it is hard to teach it.
Yeah.
Try to see secure or not.
Yeah, you bring up the security question, but the security question, a lot of the problem is the questions are maybe 4 or 5. There's not enough variety of questions to to produce that difference.
Yeah.
And distinction, yeah. You'll get 4 or 5. Your mother's maiden name, big one.
I always lie on them.
Yeah, just
Yeah, I started doing that also, lying. Yes.
Every other word, or throw a number at the end or something, so that if it's a long sentence, you got 12 words in the sentence, and you got 12 letters. It's a letter. Ways to do it, but then again, that becomes a default. But if somebody puts a profile on you, they can figure out what your habits are. That's not my default. Any other questions? Any comments? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to present you with this challenge coin for coming out and giving that presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Appreciate
appreciate the opportunity of your chapter and allowing me to give my presentation. I appreciate that.
All right. I think you're right. It's actually the halfway point. Good time if anybody wants to take a break. David has some other things. Yeah, sandwiches, drink. David has a couple things for us tonight. Y'all been to the last few meetings, the Stump Shop. And you have a video?
Video as well.
Yeah. All right, so
As far as restrooms are concerned, if you come out, take the left. They said there's some up that way, but